All right, here we are.
Woohoo. All right, guys. Suit your standard. Love that.
How's it going, guys? Welcome to the All Things Recon webinar podcast slash discussion series. We are Bobby Wilcox and Joshua Call, and we are here to discuss setting realistic goal times in Recon and suiting your own standards. Any initial thoughts, Bobby?
Yeah, this is a big subject because we roll. Everybody this what's called recon, the redheaded stepchild in many cases of a lot of dealership operations. People don't have a really good idea. They know what the goal is, right? They're the very impatient used car department wants their cars yesterday, and they throw all these cars into the service side, and they said we want our cars in 3 days, or we want our cars in so it's such and such amount of time, right? But as the march of technology advances and we start utilizing and leveraging tools to help manage our recon process, what would what parts of the process would be the goal, right? Or should I say the best practice standard? We know that we want our cars to come out the other end of the black hole, right, in a certain number of days. But what does that mean? Does it mean how much time cars? How long should detail take? How long should the inspection take? The shop, vendors, things like that. So that's some of the things that Josh and I are going to cover in this call or on this podcast to just kind of go over the industry best standard, and then some of the things that impact those parts of the process, and why your dealership should be able to conform, or why there might be some exceptions to those rules based on your business model and business practices, things like that. So
Yeah, and we also want to teach and coach through how to think through these issues as they come up and how to address reporting that you get from information that you might get from Rapid Recon or Velocity or some other tracking method that you have. How to think through setting your standards and your goals in a way that you know that your people can reach and then go beyond. And how can you approach the tools that you have, the resources that are available to you, to give you the best starting point, to give you the best foundation, to see the flourishing of your team as you try to improve reconditioning efforts over time.
yeah, and me and Josh were kind of having some discussion prior to the call. It's like, how do you arrive at that? Do you back into it? Do you break down your entire process and try to come up with your own best practice? Well, there's an industry standard, right? And me and Josh were talking about it, and my opinion was, the industry best practice, what is what we've seen when we talk to thousands of dealerships as a company, right, per month, and you know and from there, then you can kind of take a look at your own process and dissect it and figure out, can you conform to that? Can you be better than that? Or are there some really good reasons, make sure they're the right reasons, to take longer than, let's say, 5 days, 3 to 5 days with cars going through recon. So
Yeah, and it's not about necessarily excusing yourself for not reaching a certain standard. It's really just about understanding where you're at in terms of what kind of inventory do you have, what kind of resources do you have available to your staff, what kind of facilities are available. Those are the things that are going to determine whether or not you're going to be able to reach that 3 to 5 day, gold standard for the industry. But it's not enough simply to just have these goals. You have to understand how you're going to reach them. So when me and Bobby are discussing this, what I would always do is I'd work in conjunction with dealers to set these goal times initially based on their own understanding of what their people could achieve. And usually if I'm talking to the service manager, I'm talking to the lead shop foreman, I'm talking to the used car
oh, Josh, you kind of froze there for a minute.
manager, I'm talking to. Oh, did you hear me? Am I still speaking?
Oh, you're back.
Okay, I hope I didn't get cut
No,
off
you
too
were
bad.
talking, you talked to the service manager, you talked to the lead shop foreman to try and determine some, maybe some benchmarks for expectations of certain parts of
Yeah,
the
if I
process.
if I'm talking in conjunction with leaders who have on the ground experience, who have a realistic understanding of what they know their people can do, that was how I initially set up goal times, because I thought that was the best way to do it. But I think now, in conjunction with the discussion we've had, I think that a good starting point is to start with the industry best practices and then work from there based on what your reporting shows you. So I think that is ultimately where I've arrived. But we have these best practices right in front of us, and I just kind of wanted to go down the list here with you, Bobby, and
Hmm.
talk about what is your what is your thinking here when we decided that these are the industry best goal times, and then arriving at that final number.
I love it. So, as I've always, you've heard this come out of my mouth a billion times, Josh.
So
Um, Yeah, and so I got two golden rules, right? And you probably know what I'm going to say because I said it so many times. Start on day zero, right? And what I mean by that is, do you really start on day zero? But you take the car in, there should be no delay getting it into the damn shop or into your process as soon as possible, right? There needs to be there's an overall intent to do recon well, and that should be a part of your culture. So whether or not you take that car in on trade, okay, let's say you did take it on trade, let's say you're one of those dealerships, there needs to be more dealerships doing a trade walk every morning, right? This car came in overnight, came in the next day, right? You might get this car trade walked. Get this, do the trade walk in the morning. You go through the vehicles, communicate the intention of how you're going to recon the vehicle, right? And then these cars should be in the shop written up. ROs should be queued up for the shop right away. So, the initial starting fast is a huge, huge component of your overall doing recon well. And, I like to see you start on day zero, but yeah. And then another thing that, we talked about this too, Josh. If you are going to be the dealership that's going to do a quick shoot, a quick detail and a quick shoot just to get pictures online, right? Because everybody wants to be digitally frontline ready as soon as possible. You better be fast. Right? I say you better be on crack with those steps. Have somebody in house getting those preliminary pictures up and getting the car. That should be 6 hours. That should be a couple of hours or half a
now
day.
I want to respond to Herb here because he actually asked that question just now, Bobby. He said, "Are there
Oh,
other dealers out there that are doing detail and pictures first, and then input to inspection and repair?" And yes, there are, Herb. And we've talked about this before on the podcast. A lot of our dealers, what we recommend they do, and what they have been doing, which has been useful for them, is instead of doing the full detail and full pictures ahead of time, they just get a suite of photos online, whatever's going to be the requirement that they need to meet, whatever their standard is. They get that full suite of photos online with whatever condition that they can get for
they
the
call it
car
a
right
short
now.
shoot. Yeah, they call it a
Short
short
shoot,
shoot. And yeah,
quick
yeah.
pics. Um, but a lot of dealers uh, still are really not satisfied even with the compromise solution because marketing is so very, very important. If the photos aren't online, your car is just not going to get any attention. So in that case, they still do detail and pictures ahead of time, and they do pay for that. They pay for that in 2 or 3 days, perhaps, and most often they do.
Like, yeah, like we
Two or three
discussed.
days on top. Go
I'm
ahead,
sorry,
Bobby.
just didn't mean to step on you there. Yeah, we find that dealerships that are doing detail and pictures ahead of time are typically 2 days, on average, 2 days. Some cases, 3 days slower than average. Right, they're at the 6, 7 day mark. And you look, sure enough, there's pre photos and pre wash or whatever is eating up 2 days, a day and a half, 2 days, 3 days in some cases before the car even sees the shop. I get it. You want to be digitally frontline ready. Get that damn car online. Make sure you're not famous for selling cars that have never been through the shop, right? Because that's going to happen. People are shopping these cars and you didn't recon them yet because they're already online because that's what you want to do. But with that said, make sure you're fast and then make sure these cars are in the shop. We know we're rushing, we're taking the risk of, you think about it, a couple days holding time on top of the money to detail it and pictures. 2 to 3 days goes by before you even know if you're going to keep the car, right? Then the car fails to shop and now you got to, take it off the internet. And I know we weather that storm because it was so important to get the car digitally frontline ready, right? We're willing to take that risk. Just make sure you're fast at it. That's it. I don't want to dwell too much on that topic, but if you're going to detail and photos up front, which Herb, great input, we find more and more dealerships that's the standard. And so, and if they're using our tools, we'll put the detail and photos as like a prelim, um, and then they get the car into the shop. So that's
It's
that's a
funny how
great topic.
often, Bobby, Recon is negotiating a compromise between two sort of competing ambitions, right? So in this case, we want to make sure that we get the car inspected as soon as possible, so we know what we're going to ultimately end up spending, or if we're going to retail it at all.
Mhm.
But we also need to have that presence online in terms of marketing, uh, in order to be competitive in the internet, on the
Yeah,
internet. So,
yeah.
and that
And
happens
Herb
all the
said,
time.
yeah, Herb
Go
saying
ahead.
that, yeah, it is worth a lot. Yeah, digital frontline ready is huge nowadays, right? Yeah, your car doesn't exist unless it's online and ready to go. Just be fast. Just be fast at that part of the process. We're happy to, you know, augment or change the workflows to reflect that's what you're doing in your dealership. And hey, I'm all about it. I'm all about it. Just just be sensible and make sure you're quick at that, because you don't want that delay with getting the car into the shop. One thing we didn't discuss, Josh, is overall, we found that our industry best practice is 5 days. I know there's been books written, Dale Pollock back in the day, the 72-hour turn, all that stuff. We've come off that a little bit because, if you're really getting your cars now frontline ready, means it's out there, it's standing tall, your buyer's guy or whatever's on the car, it's all stickered up, it's looking good, right? Um, if you're really getting all that done in 3 days, what are your cars really looking like, right? So yeah, 2 days in the shop, another day in detail, 3 days technically sellable. But hey, I think, over the last few years, we've seen more and more, hey, we want our cars to stand tall. We don't want to have to apologize for our cars. So as consultants and, based around our tool, and when we talk to dealerships, we've done what's called a drive to five. So everybody that joins our tool, whether it's Rapid Recon Pro, Recon Velocity, built into that, in 2 weeks out after you launch, you're going to have a meeting with one of us to just kind of go over best practices using the tool and things like that. So 5 days total, but let's break that down. Okay. So getting the car into the shop within, probably within 12 hours of taking it in would be, I would say, reasonable, best practice. By the next day, by the middle of the next day, you take it in today, it's in the shop, hopefully by late morning, early afternoon, the following day. So
And
cool.
then, so we can see here are the recommendations for, each stage of the process. Inspection should be no more than 24 hours. Repair no more than 24 hours. Approvals, of course, lightning fast approvals. And I'm gonna jump on ahead of you there, Bobby, before you get a chance to say it again. But of course, there's two things not to suck at, right? One thing is we don't want the units to spend any time on our lot that nothing's being done to them when they've arrived. We want to start on day zero. And then, of course, our approval should be lightning fast. And of course, if you're working with Rapid Recon, if you're working with Velocity, you have a tool to make your approvals remote, to make them fast. And it's important that you utilize those tools and you don't force your people to stop what they're doing and come running after you for approvals. But of course, if you're a part of this podcast, you probably, or if you're here listening to us now, you probably don't need to be told that. But we're going to keep harping on it because we do have new people every time. And then, detail no less than 24 hours, photos no less than 12 hours, or no more than 12 hours. I think I've been saying no less, my bad, no more. And then altogether, right, with if you were able to keep to this standard, you'll have your cars retail ready in 4.5 days. And
Mhm.
this is the industry, this is the gold standard by your measure, right, Bobby?
Yeah, and there's it's a kind of an interesting conversation, right? Because not all cars end up, not all cars follow the rules, right? Most cars don't always follow the rules. You got your cream puffs, if you're like a Lexus or a BMW dealership, you get a lot of lease turn-ins, right? Relatively clean cars, low mileage, not a whole lot needs to be done. It's going to kind of it's going to bring down your average a little bit, right? We were talking about, Josh, some business model differences, right? If you're the rock lot, buy here, pay here, your cars are going to take a little bit longer to get through the shop, a little bit more repair, right? So your business model can affect, maybe some deviation from the best practice, right? But if we back it up, you say, I usually say 1 day in the inspection phase of the shop, 1 day in the repair phase. Overall shop, 2 days on average. Some cars are going to fly through, cream puffs, LOF, oil change, cabin engine air filter, wipers, send it to detail. The next car is going to need 4 tires and alignment, battery replace, maybe a lower control arm or whatever. That's going to take up some time. So in the grand scheme of things, when all shakes out, all the exceptions to the rules, right? Added into all the cars that allowed you to get through faster, 1 day 24 hours on average in the inspection phase, and then 24 hours in the repair phase. Um, in between that now, right, you got the inspection, the technicians, and then putting together the estimate and the approvals of work. That has to be fast. And Josh, you said it. Um, two golden rules, right? So if you start fast, start on day zero, approve work in a timely fashion. I call that the intent to do recon well, right? That's a that's like a measure of recon behavior. Um, I know that some cars are squeakers and you got to think about, or you got to consult, I didn't think this car, I was going to be 2 grand deep or 3 grand deep on this car. I thought it was cleaner than that. I know some cars take a little bit longer to make decisions on whether you're going to keep it, put the money into it, negotiate down, but in the grand scheme of things, I think approvals should be definitely not hours, definitely not days, right? Hopefully minutes, 30 minutes, less than an hour on average, to react to an estimate being presented to you and approving the work.
So there's a lot of ways to get your team to understand the urgency with which you'd like them to complete the recon work. Which we've talked about pay plans and incentives and all kinds of ways to structure culture and to coach culture over the last podcast episodes that we've had. So you can check in with those previous episodes for more examples. But one of the ways that you can engender a sense of urgency in your process and make sure that everyone understands that you take this seriously is, if you're on the sales side, especially if you're handling these approvals, is getting them done quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you froze up a little bit there, Josh. I'm going to take over. Herb had put in
Because
a,
if
are there any programs that coexist with our DMS? Funny you said that. Well, we are currently we're working on some beta testing with CDK to integrate, parts pricing and, helping handshake with the DMS a little bit better to smooth out the transfer of information to Rapid Recon Pro or Recon Velocity, because there's where that's a common hang up, and there's a gap, right? Because these sales managers, I promise, are not hanging out in Reynolds or CDK looking at ROs and estimates and stuff like that. It's kind of up to the internal advisor or whoever's in the middle. And what it typically requires is that internal advisor to decipher the information, whether maybe you're using Xtime, maybe you're using some third-party tools, right? But at the end of the day, the estimate has to make it into the tool because it's got to be, digestible and viewable by the used car manager, who's typically not in the fixed op side of things. So to bridge that gap, that's a typical hang up. So we are working on some parts integrations with currently CDK, hopefully some more to come on that, to make life easier with that. So,
am I still frozen?
no, you're good, man. You're good. But backing up to the inspection time, and then so fast approvals, right? Should be minutes, not hours. Josh, we go in sometimes. Oh, why are we at 7 days? And it's like you look, or 8 days, or 10 days, and you look, and approvals on average, even if you're in like rapid recon, it's like a 0.4. Sometimes that approval, because there's a step for it. Okay, that's why we make a step for it. When the shop or whoever puts the car in that needs approval step, the managers are now on the clock for how long it takes them to approve work, right? So they should, do that quickly. If you got no business, guns ablazing, looking for your cars if you can't approve work in a timely fashion, because we see it every time. As soon as there's an inflation or a large amount of time in approval of work. So if it's a 0.4, that means it takes you 10 to 11 hours on average to approve an estimate. Okay, when you do that, this is what happens. When that's the norm, your technicians figure it out. Oh, I'm not going to hear back on this car. So I'm going to take this car, park it outside, throw the keys on my bench. I'm going to go on to my next inspection, right? And then you finally get around to approving that work. And now your technicians are 2 to 3 cars deep. And now they got to go back and finish what they're doing on these and then go back and get the car. Oh, and then you got to order parts. Well, guess what? That 12 hours pushed you to the next day, or it might have pushed you past the parts cutoff time. Now you got to order parts that aren't in stock, and now it's going to take you another 2 to 3 days, right, to get the car. Almost always with an increase, with an inflated um, approval time, you're going to have inflated parts hold and repair times. Like Almost always. You can be blazing fast in the inspection, put together the estimate, delayed approvals, 10 to 12 hours on average. It just creates it creates inconvenience for the technician, disorganization, and it just kind of falls apart. So be fast with approvals, and that way you're not missing parts cutoff times. Parts are being ordered, and then when the parts are here, it's just a function of getting the car done. And on
And
that
that,
note,
that goes hand in hand with something I was saying earlier, Bobby. And I hope I don't get frozen up again. Let me know if I do
oh, you're
get
good.
frozen.
No, you're
We'll
good.
see if I can complete a thought here. But that goes hand in hand with what I said earlier when we were talking about this. With because recon is not always everyone's main priority. If there's hitches, if there's holdups in the process, people will get distracted. They'll have to move on to another task. They'll get bogged down with something else. So you have to, in making sure that the approvals come back quickly, you don't give people a chance to get distracted with some other task, because oftentimes at dealerships, recon is not the number one priority for each and every individual, even though it is a big priority for the sales department.
Yeah, and that kind of I've had these thoughts in the past, and I put on my tough love conversation hat, and it's like the pay plans that benefit the most from doing this well should not be poor at doing this well, right? So approve work in a timely fashion. It's going to speed up. Just focus on it. If there one thing, you can have a whole bunch of problems, but approve work in a timely fashion, right? So now after you approve the work, that should help keep your parts hold to a minimum, right? Because now you're getting, a lot of times it's a function of waiting 20, 30 minutes for, if you're using aftermarket parts, you're not relying on your stock orders, you might be able to get some tires, Tire Kingdom, or, O'Reilly's Advanced Auto Parts down the streets bringing you that. You don't need the factory control arm or the factory outer tie rod. You can get these parts, they got parts runners, right? So get the approvals done fast so you're at least getting the parts there. Or if it is something that's got to be on your stock order, a lot of times the cutoff's like 4 in the afternoon. We're waiting on, approvals before we can even order parts, and you miss that, just add 2 days to every car, right? Then you got one day. So you got 12 to 24 hours in the repair phase. So after the approvals, on average, you should be about a day. So when you look at your reporting in Rapid Recon Pro or Recon Velocity, when I look at the main categories, and that's why we like to split up the workflows into inspection phase and repair phase. It gives you better drill down, right? And one day in inspection, one day in repair with very fast approval times. That's the best practice. And then you
And
finally
so,
get the car to detail.
yeah, yeah. If you're doing it our way, then you finally get the car into detail. Once you know you're going to retail it.
Yeah, it passes.
Um,
Yep, you're going to keep it. It's going through. And again, the urgency in the front part of the process too. For those cars you're not going to keep, don't let it sit and contaminate your stats, eating up time in your workflow. If you figure out sooner than later that you can't keep the car, blown head gasket, or it's going to need some major engine work, is not worth it. You're not in it to put all that money in it, so you punt it to wholesale. You get rid of it. So the sooner you know that, the less bleeding happens in your process. Now detail, you know, a little bit of a redheaded stepchild, right? Um, one of the hardest departments, I think, to that run smoothly in dealerships. Kudos if your dealership has a rock star detail department, but a lot of people like to blame detail, right, for being slow, and but detail 12, no more than 24 hours. Typically, when we look at workflows, if a detail creeps to 1.2, 1.5 days in detail, I would tell when we're on calls, consulting with dealerships, hey, that's something to look at. Try to get that closer to a day. If it's a day and a half, not the end of the world. Good news is you were great on inspections and you're still at like maybe a 5.5, or you might be at 4.8 days. But you know what? Detail being a day and a half, 2 days, take a look at it. And Josh, like we said, there might be some reasons. If your detail department's a quarter mile down the street and there's a transport issue, it doesn't matter. If it still takes you 2 days to get detail done, or 3 days, you got to start looking at a couple things. Do you have enough people? Or are the people you might have enough people, but they're just not efficient, right? If they're on an hourly pay plan, how do you instill some urgency? How do you expect them? Uh, how do you coach the efficiency component, right? If it's not a part of their pay plan to be fast. That's why I love flat rate kind of like how technicians get paid flat rate detail departments, where if I work 40 hours and I can bust my ass and, hustle through these cars, I can, I get a 60, 70-hour paycheck, but I only worked 40 hours, right? So I think that's
Yeah,
important.
or bonus incentives. I see those discussed all the time.
Mhm.
Based on production quality. If everything's quality every time and we hit our mark every time in terms of volume, then we're going to get some dollar amount more on on that paycheck. Um, but when in giving these prescriptions, I do just want to say that we are here to work with dealers to understand their processes better so that they can interrogate and investigate what's going on when they're not able to meet these goals. So if they're not able to meet these goals. So if for instance, our inspections are taking us longer than 24 hours, we're going to work with you to try and figure out why that would be the case. And we're going to investigate the process. We're going to investigate, hey, what is it that we're requiring? Is everything in place for the technician to begin their work? When they do begin their work, what is the value? What is the kind of inventory that we're working with? Do we expect to have to diagnose issues quite often? Is that is that what's impacting our inspection times? Do we not have experienced technicians to work with here? There's a lot of questions that come up in when only when you really start tracking whether or not you're meeting this goal time, this standard in the first place.
Yeah, and if you feel like you got, enough technicians, right? And as we know, the best practice is to have a dedicated team of technicians, have used car specific technicians. If you're doing 30, 40 cars a month, yeah, you might have one or two dedicated guys, right? You're doing 100 cars a month, you might have 3 or 4 dedicated technicians on average, right? So based on your volume, but take a look at those technicians. I can look like a rock star if I inspected and finished 7 cars in the whole week, right? And I did them fast. And then I'm smoking 3 packs of cigarettes behind the gazebo in between cars and taking 3-hour lunch breaks, right? I can still look like a rock star. Make sure the efficiency's there. So, if you fixed ops guys, or hey, if you're on the variable ops side, or check with the fixed ops or the service manager and say, hey, what's the productivity of these used car techs? Um, as a standard, you should be at least 110 to 120% productive to even be on the used car team. Because if things are going right in your dealership and you got some go-getters, they should be beating down the doors to get on the used car team. I that because it's just built in, right? The service's number one customer, otherwise known as the used car department, is always going to have this flow of cars coming through. There's never a shortage of work, but you got to be a go-getter on top of it to be on the used car team. So there's an expectation, there's a function of having enough people, but make sure those people that you have are turning in an efficient manner, 110, 120% productivity. And I love it when that's the standard to stay on the used car team. So that's super important as well.
In order to measure that in the first place, you have to set that goal, and you can set it based on the industry standard that we describe here, or you can set it based on your own standard, what you think is appropriate, based on the capabilities of your team. But either way, once you've done that, that's when you begin to actually look at what data you can capture. And that's all going to depend on the level of utilization you're capable of with a tool like Rapid or Velocity, or if you have any kind of tracking tool, no matter what it is. One of the things I wanted to emphasize here in this meeting, or this little session, was that if your people feel individually responsible for and accountable to the units that are in their part of the process, the things that are in their steps of the process, you're going to get really good data back from them about how long it takes for a unit to pass through different phases of your operation. And that'll give you the best starting point to really analyze what are my goals here? Can I achieve my goal? What is a realistic standard to set going forward? So that because the point of the system here, or Rapid, Velocity, any of these tools, especially if you're working with Rapid and Velocity, you guys are all going to be familiar with the green, yellow, red cars, the color trigger warning system. And so a lot of dealers think that when they see a red unit, or they see units in red, or they see units bottlenecking, or they're not meeting their goals, that they just immediately need to jump jump on something and hammer things into place until the numbers look right. If you're seeing red, or if you're seeing bottlenecking, or if you're seeing, your scoreboard is under where you want to be, that's a good thing, because it means that you have a starting point. It means that you have something to address. It means that some part of your process is obviously hurting, and you can do something about it. If you have really, really stellar times across the board, and really who I'm speaking to now are the people who are in this meeting who are looking at these goal times and are saying, we're not doing that. Why aren't we doing that? That's going to be your very next question when you look at this. I know it is. And the answer to that question is going to depend on who you are, what kind of inventory you got, what kind of market base you're working with, what your experience level of your employees are. And we want to answer those questions in conjunction with you. So if you ever want to work with the performance team here at Rapid Recon, you can do that. And we're going to work with you on a granular level. We're going to understand the needs of your particular business plan. And we're going to work with you to figure out, with the people that you got, with the facilities that you got, what is a realistic goal for each and every stage of your process. And so that way, when you see cars in red, and when you see things bottlenecking, you know that it's actually real. You know it's something that's actually really happening right now, and it's something you can address. Because otherwise, what will happen is, if you set yourself to these standards, without thinking about it, without being critical about it, what you're going to do is you're just going to always have your inventory in red. You're always going to have your workflow looking terrible. You're always going to have your scorecard with the big red number going way over your goal times. And I just think that the customers that make the best use of our tool are the ones that are that involve themselves in setting their own standards.
Yeah, it's what you do after you measure it, right? So you got the reporting, and if you can't, like they say, you can't measure it, you can't grow it, you can't grow your process. And on that note, Josh, since we're towards the tail end here,
Yeah.
it doesn't hurt to, convey the concept of velocity and turn to the people that actually make recon happen, right? Do your people know that, the scientific reason why it makes sense to get the cars frontline ready sooner than later? Or do they just think, it's the car business, and, the managers are impatient and they always want their cars yesterday? They don't know the why. They just know what the expectation is. So feel free, educate your people on the why. Why does it make sense, and how does it benefit the grand scheme of things if we get cars out there sooner than later? We sell them faster, we replace them faster, and then sure enough, we got more cars coming through the shop.
All right. Well, the last thing I want to emphasize, and I'm going to emphasize it again, is just, if your people are taking individual responsibility for their own parts of the process. And I have something here at the end I thought it was elucidates this pretty well. I'm interacting with this, so I'm going to freeze up a little bit here in a second. But anyway, basically, if I'm a technician and let's say I have a technician inspection step here in the workflow for Rapid Recon or Velocity, or I have a repair step. If I have a unit in that step, that means that car is with me right now, and I'm working on it, or I'm responsible for the car at this point in time. Am I frozen? Can you hear me, or am I just?
I can hear you. I heard you all throughout. You froze up, but your audio was still good.
Okay, good. The point being, y'all, is that if each member of your team feels individually responsible for the parts of the process that describe what they do, if I'm the technician, it's my inspection step. If each person is accountable to the time that units are in that step, you're going to get really good data back to use as a jumping off point to set really good standardized goals for your team. And I think, and in general, the whole thing's going to run a lot more smoothly. So the starting point really for all of this is making sure that if you have a tool like Rapid, if you have a tool like Velocity, that people feel individually responsible for the units that they are responsible for. And of course, they understand that system is a direct reflection of their productivity, of their contributions to overall production in Recon. So if you can build that, you'll have really good data, and you'll have a really good system to build a rock solid process on top of.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Culture is huge.
Yeah, and I think that a good culture stems from good relationships and good individuals, of course. But it's the greatest starting point is always going to be the foundation of a good process. So a good process gets everybody on the same page, makes sure everybody understands where they are relative to one another, and from there you can have really good, common, flourishing relationships that build that culture over time. But it starts with process. It starts with having a good standard process where everyone understands exactly what their role is and how they contribute to the whole. And once that happens, that's when the relationships and the flourishing begins to start, where you see from the process a culture of transparency, accountability, individual responsibility. All that comes from having a system and a process where everyone can see each other, everyone knows how they contribute. I can see how you contribute. I can see how your work contributes to my work, how my work contributes to everyone else's. And when that's transparent and everyone's aware of it and everyone can see it, it really brings people together. And that's what's going to ultimately transform a dealership from middling, mediocre to stellar and amazing.
Well said, Mr. Joshua Call. Good stuff.
Well, I
All
think
right, guys.
that was a lot for this topic.
We
I
fit it
think
all in.
we could go on and on about setting goal times, I'm sure. But we really appreciate everyone who's joined us. Keep in mind, y'all, this is a running series. We do this every third Thursday of every month. We're going to cover new topics every time. There's a poll up right now about what topic you'd like us to cover next. Someone already chose how to make processes that stick. They're the only person that's voted so far. I was hoping someone would vote for that, but if you want to hear about any of the other topics available or another topic in general, just let us know. Email us. I love talking about how to make processes stick because that's what I did as a trainer and implementer for so many years, and you as well, Bobby. So we could probably talk for hours on that as well. But otherwise, really appreciate everyone's time and thanks for joining us. And
Yep.
have a wonderful day and weekend, y'all.
Looks like we're on for the 23rd of October will be the next podcast. So stay tuned, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, Bobby. Hear from you soon.